Chapter 7, Recording Number 2, Germain, Saturday, August 31st, 1991, 7:59 a.m., Year 5, Day 15. Saturday, August 31st, 1991. Germain present in this wondrous day of experience. May we walk always in the radiance of His holy light. The purpose of the cube in nature. We have carefully described the purpose of the sphere in creating this curved universe of dynamic motion by dividing the static universe of no motion into light waves. These light waves are thus permitted to multiply the cold condition of space into heat by the aid of biconvex lenses and to divide the heat into cold by the aid of concave ones. The cube enables light waves to repeat themselves by the use of light mirrors of zero curvature. The tools which build creation are, therefore, light projecting lenses and mirror reflecting planes. See Figure 48. Power projection means the wireless transmission of power generated from anywhere to wherever one wishes to project it. This power is of utmost value to science because it enables it to build missiles with which it can strike any designated section of another country, and also to build anti-missiles which find and destroy missiles sent from other countries. No, I'm not in the missile building business, but you have a whole bunch aimed at you and a network of them aimed at each other everywhere on your globe. These are for war usage. But for peacetime usage, power could be projected from one power plant to another without the necessity of using hundreds of thousands of miles of wire transmission cable. Nature does not use wires to maintain that tremendous cosmic intercommunication system which links every creating thing to every other creating thing. This enables us to say that there are no two separate or separable things in all of this universe. There is but one. It thus demonstrates the oneness of all things and creatures in this universe. On the yesterday I was, of necessity, quite abrupt with Wally G, for which I apologize. It was urgent that Otten have the use of the hands, which will be abundantly clear as you ones read the information about the missing 13th Amendment, removed from your U.S. Constitution deliberately, which bars lawyers from governmental positions of trust and service. What I do wish to say to Wally and any of you who have a definite purpose and know that which it is, please bear with us. I appreciate your desires to go and investigate, honor and look up details about ones with whom I share and funnel information. I must ask, however, that you refrain from rushing out and becoming sidetracked unless I tell you to do so. What I give you, as in the case of Wally, and this writing and drawings will also be sent to him immediately, is that which you need. Further, it is the only information from this beloved author which is of technical value. This is not to diminish the giving of any being. It is to keep ones with purpose from being confused and further distracted. It is what we of the hosts are, sorters of information in truth from the haystack. Mr. Russell's work is excellent, but like so many other points of projection, parts of that work become totally absorbed by outside influence, and only the technical output is untampered and worthy in its remaining form. The New Age searchers have managed to usurp into a metaphysical center his wondrous contribution and that of his most beautiful spouse. Therefore, I ask all of you who work within my tutelage with intent to build from that which I give in technical information. Please trust me enough to understand that I have chosen very carefully that which is needed to complete a task or bring it to the point of readiness for the next key. The one important thing upon which everything is stalled is working script and preliminary information to finance Sipapu. All else, including camera technology, is of no importance whatsoever at this time. The information, Wally, is to allow the seeds to germinate within, and the answers will appear when the sequence is proper. Please, dear ones, stop pushing the river. Also, I urge you ones who who receive special information and direction, be most careful with whom you share it in technical discussions, for all of you once have proven that you cannot tell enemy from friend, and many will take your work and simply steal it from you. So be it. There is another point which I shall have to make very clear indeed. If you have great babble, you jeopardize our very lives. Also, for this information has another use of utmost importance. This knowledge gives the ability to control the landing places of astronauts in space satellites and to make use of balloon-like satellites for telephone projection to distant countries and even to automobiles on the roads. You have basically a reverse idea of proper equipment structuring for maximum use without necessity of atomic thrust systems and high use of energy for operation. All of this is made possible because science has learned to control gravity to quite a considerable extent, even though it is not aware that it has done so. We have mentioned this in a prior lesson when speaking of the eminent scientists who said he believed it would be possible someday to attain knowledge on how to control gravity. In that same lesson, we discussed the making of a gravity-powered reactor which would eliminate the use of atomic energy and give unlimited heat at almost no expense by using generated surplus and thereby getting continuous power without the use of current from a power plant. We wherewith print another diagram, figure 49, which analyzes the different sections of the cube by taking it apart. The selections marked B and BB show how the cube is divided into 6 geometric forms, known as tetrahedrons, which control the static universe of stillness, and the selections marked D and DD show it divided into 6 cones which control the curved universe of motion by revolving spirally within the static cube. Study this figure 49 with us as we proceed. The closing spirals, these generate energy from the cold of space to heat it through compressing invisible light into visible light by thrusting inward from without. Occupy just 2 tetrahedrons. But the radiating spirals, these revolve in one centering plane on the equators of the suns thus produced, revolve within the other 4 tetrahedrons and create the gravity fields which science calls magnetic fields. We now refer you to the cube marked A. Note that it is bounded by its 6 planes and intersected by 3 planes, all at right angles, as marked 1. 2 shows the 1 cubed divided into 8, and therein lies the mathematical basis of pressures in nature. Falling bodies multiply the power of compression 8 times that which they were when they began falling. This is known in mathematics as the cube in inverse ratio. For rising bodies, it is known as of the cube in direct ratio. Now, by adding the 0 position, which is the central part of the cube where matter has reached its maximum compression and heat, we derive our decimal system of 1, -2, -3, -4, -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 becomes 1 again. The 9th being the anode of the wave, and the first and last being its 2 cathodes and equators of reversal or points of rest. We again refer to the diagram and note in C that the 6 circles drawn on the 6 faces of the cube are conical lines reaching toward the cube center. These conical lines relate to the curved universe of motion, as clearly shown in D and DD. In D, only 4 are shown, for to show the other 2 would be impossible. We therefore expand them in perspective at DD to make it possible. Now we come to a vitally important fact. The cube of 6 flat faces alone can crystallize in the forms of the cube and its intersections. They represent the static universe. Conical surfaces cannot crystallize in their forms because they represent the transient, curved, ever-changing universe of motion. We will now consider another phase of universal mathematics, for which we print figures 50 and 51. We have placed these on opposite pages where you can compare each with the other. In mathematics, we have what are known as three dimensions. We will not yet deal with fourth dimension equations, for you must make workable objects within this three-dimensional experience. The fourth will then take care of itself, as you will see, for the fourth only relieves the confusion of wear and operation compression. Further, we don't need expertise in the fourth dimension expression, for we already have the operational technology. These three represent the tonal pressures of the octaves. The octaves of the elements begin with a zero group, which is known as the inert gases. The first dimension represents that pressure tone, which is represented in the carbon octave, lithium, and fluorine, the first equally divided mate pair. The second dimension represents the second equally divided pair, which is known as beryllium and oxygen. The third dimension is represented by boron and nitrogen, the third equally divided mate pair of this sex-divided universe of motion. Now we come to an unknown fact of nature which gives a fourth dimension and which must be considered herein, and that is represented in its octave as carbon and on the bar magnet as the end poles. Carbon is not a pair as the others are. It is a union of all other pairs melded into one. Carbon and its prototypes are at the wave amplitudes. In carbon are all of the colors of the spectrum united as one, and the entire 9-lens producing spectrum of both curvatures, convex and concave. This entire octave and the other 8 octaves add up to but one meaning, and the meaning is universal, unless... the meaning is universal, oneness of the one thing, light. That includes the one brotherhood of man, all the species, and all things else. It means that there are no two separate or separable things in all the universe. And it also means that love is the basis of creation, which leads us to the door of the Creator, for God is light and also love. Oberly, I ask that Chuck receive the same special information which I am giving up front to Wally, and then please see to it that he gets all pertinent information. We want him familiar with these concepts like the back of his hand. He will not be given into full understanding, for it is not time for him to fill his purpose, and I want no confusion. He will have to cleanse his mind of that which is already in it, and that will be difficult enough without added burden. Thank you, for much will be given to him to further the ideas Paul was being given at his demise. Concern not about it, just provide the information. There is one other fact about crystallization that has never been understood. The fact is that the octaves progress from the carbon octave, which has no hole in it as the previous octaves have, in which densities multiply from the inside out, whereas the octaves which have closed their holes increase their densities from the outside in, which means from outward toward their centers within. They complex their crystal forms. The cube form of the carbon octave complexes to hexagonal, and each succeeding octave complexes still more to octahedral and so on, until the complexity increases so much that in the niton inert gas it has no reflecting mirrors to multiply light power inward. It still compresses, but becomes so weak that the explosive power intensifies to incandescence. There it explodes to the speed of light, which is 186,400 miles per second. All visible incandescent light, back to the fourth octave, reaches that speed of light also. That is because the fourth octave is the first of 9 to have closed its hole. From there on, all amplitude elements of succeeding octaves, which have no holes in them, Multiply their speed to 186,400 miles per second. From wave amplitudes, invisible light flows backward to the first octave through its inert gases. Within the incandescence of the cube form lies the secret of atomic energy. And yes, for you precious ones such as E.J. Buffet and Dee, who wrote on the calendar many years ago that Dee would receive the clues of Tesla, here it is. If you can understand the concept laid forth herein, which very few will be allowed to do, you have it. There is one more reason why science must know about the power of the cube before we close this lesson. That is, the production of that universal effect called radar. Radar is the great communication system for recording all effects of motion and repeating them to all other effects in the universe at the speed of light. Figure 52 illustrates this effect. Note that each section of the sphere centers one of its 8 cubes at the intersection points of its 8 divisions and its 3 intersecting planes, all of which are at right angles to each other. Each of these sections projects light rays outward in all of the 8 directions of motion in space. These directions are the 4 points of the compass: east, west, north, and south, plus northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. Radar technicians give a name to the 8 corners where they divide the sphere into 8 sections. They call them corner receivers and recite them as a power in ratio. Recite them as a power in radio. They are not only receivers but reflectors or projectors or transmitters. Their radars are based on this principle, but they make use of only one in building their radar machines. There is no reason why 5 of them should not be used. They would cover the 4 points of the compass and the azimuth without the necessity of sweeping the horizon. There is no need for using the other 3 corners, as it is not necessary to direct the flow to Earth's surface. This concludes our first brief summary of the fundamentals of your new look at your universe. Therefore, I ask for a short break for refreshment, and then we will march right along into and through the wondrous nature of light. I am Germain. Chapter 8, recording number 3, Germain. Saturday, August 31st, 1991, 19:54 a.m., Year 5, Day 15. Nature of Light. Throughout the last several chapters, we emphasized the following facts. 1. That every effect is an optical effect. 2. That every action-reaction, such as in-breathing and out-breathing, compression and expansion, is two-way, not one-way, which means that this is a reciprocating, continuous, pendulum-swinging universe of rhythmic balanced interchange between the cold stillness of space and the compression-heated moving universe. 3. That it is a universe of repetitive uphill and downhill flow, and that the expanding universe is inconsistent with nature's processes. 4. That, as a consequence, the present laws of thermodynamics necessarily picture a dying, heat-death universe known as entropy, instead of an eternal one created by an eternal God. 5. That gravity is the controller of light, and that light is the one thing in all nature. 6. That science has mistaken magnetism for gravity, and light waves are known as electricity. 7. Finally, that every effect is a photographic effect made by opening-closing diaphragms of the cosmic camera, which makes this universe an optical, photosynthetic universe of gravity-controlled light, instead of the electromagnetic universe of the present era's concept. We might have added to this list that atoms were not solid spheres, but only empty ones with holes in them which had to become closed before they could become solid. They, therefore, had no nuclei till they reached their wave amplitudes, where they were united as one complete spectrum unit. They then divided into pairs where they could reproduce themselves as father and mother pairs of the sexed universe. We might also have laid more emphasis on the fact that although two curvatures were the only tools for creating this curved universe of matter, just one tool, the cube, is used for repeating these pulsations of interchanging between the two curvatures. We will now take another great step forward in opening the doors of knowledge to the nature of light by again referring to the misconception about parallel rays of light which, if true, could never make invisible light visible by twisting them spirally together. Up to the date of the issuance of this original information, science knew no way of dividing this undivided universe of invisible light, which the Creator is, into pairs of opposites of the spectrum. This was intentional in its absence of acceptance of this when originally given, for those who did utilize the information have been banished and or the information used for negative adversarial purposes. I imagine that it is quite clear to you by now that the Russians were the first to accept the new scientific input that we now bring. Pairs of opposites of the spectrum, which are necessary to create this repetitive universe of pulsing motion, function by heating cold into varying pressures to create the elements of matter, which again freeze to hold them in that state, and which man may further heat or dissolve in order to fill his needs. From there, they then return to the cold of their source in space by the slow process of radiation, as all bodies do. The knower who created pulsing light of living bodies gave man another way of dividing light by creating darkness for him. Eyes were given him with limited vision. These eyes were able to see but a short segment of visible light bodies. Beyond them, all light was invisible to their vision. Darkness, therefore, was given man as another way of dividing the undivided. You will know what we mean by day and night sequences by turning off the lights in your room. You can no longer see light because it is beyond your range of vision, but you know that it is still there. It is the one thing which can never be extinguished. In the same sense, you cannot see God, but you can know that God is behind all the orderliness which creation is. Science has long known that a pinhole punched in a cardboard enclosure surrounding darkness would expand rays of visible light into a series of light rings within which the holes were larger in the center and grew smaller toward their outside. Science terms them diffraction rings, and wonders why they thus split up into rings instead of continuing as parallel rays of light. If photographed in color, it would be seen that the centering hole would be blue, as it is in the Lyra ring in the heavens, and the red and yellow would be on the outside rim. This means that density increases from inside toward the outside, and this characterizes all expanding masses. Now, as to the reason why they thus expand, which science admittedly does not know, science forgets that the rays which entered that pinhole were compressed into their brilliant visibility by gathering them from large areas and winding them in centripetal spirals. That is what compression does. As soon as those compressed light rays, which were gathered from the darkness and multiplied, entered the darkness of the pinhole camera, they necessarily divided, for we again repeat that darkness divides heat rays into cold as well as its own radiation divides it. One might ask why darkness divides the light rays of radiating fires of the sun, and then doubt it because he believes that solids like wood and stone do not thus dissolve, but they do. Even the stones deep down in the dark earth dissolve into water by cold wetness flowing to the earth's surface to cool, as well as to combine with the rays of the fiery sun. They likewise have been cooled by the cold darkness of space to the temperatures required by the earth to grow things. The very planet then takes its turn in being dissolved in the same manner and absorbs its water to further disintegrate the planet. The absorbed water even takes its own turn and disintegrates into the lower water gases of earlier octaves, such as methane. Returning to the subject of your earth, you have seen stones crumbled by wet coldness and by wood by wet dampness and by dry rot from its heat. Residents and visitors of London have seen stones of centuries-old buildings crumble to the extent where their surfaces could be scratched off with one's fingertips. Let us study the two opposite pairs of compression and expansion as we proceed. See now figures 53 and 54. Figure 53 is the type of wave which begins with a hole and endeavors to close its hole by intersecting other hollow wave spheres to form biconvex lenses to aid it. Science terms these intersecting waves wave interferences and makes no explanation of their vast importance in furnishing the two curved tools which the Creator alone uses to create this curved universe of motion. It is this type of light ring which gives birth to the other type, for we again repeat that compression begets expansion, and expansion begets compression. Together, these two opposite curvatures are equal mates as fathers and mothers are equal mates. They occupy opposite sides of the spectrum and interchange to create other equal father and mother opposites. Such interchange unites both opposites as one, to create other opposites father and mother pairs to continue this universe of motion into eternity. It manifests the balanced equality of the sex principle as the very foundation of this dynamic universe of motion. Let us now refer to figure 54. We first observe how and why compression begets expansion and vice versa. If one throws a compressed mass such as a stone into water, it will beget the figure 54 type of wave. Note that the compression causes the opposite mate to be centered with shorter and higher waves, which expand to greater distances apart as they recede from that center. This should not be difficult for you to understand, for it should be familiar to you from your childhood. You can see the same effect when a fish captures an insect upon the water's surface. Here's another example of nature's processes to help clarify the meaning of that pinhole camera. That cupboard through which the hole has been punched is an equator which divides compression from expansion. If you will observe the waves of water as they approach a hole in a cliff or a hole between rocks in a running brook, you will see curved waves closing inward as they near that hole and piling up above the water level, then dropping in foamy bubbles, which become more foamy as the drop becomes deeper. That spells out the meaning that compression is the cause and expansion is the effect of that closing. Science, however, uses the words diffraction and refractions for similar effects of that same cause. Our point in this discussion is to prove that science uses those terms, diffraction and refraction, and many other effects of similar nature.